But I just want to say welcome to everyone this morning. Thanks for being so flexible with your time today. I know that we had to do a little bit of a time change because I had a conflict this morning. So I appreciate everyone who's able to make today's Actionable Innovations conversation with Bobbi Kurshan. I met Bobbi, just as a preface, through Betsy Corcoran. I knew you were the executive director, Bobbi, of Curriki, but I'm pretty sure it was Betsy that introduced us when she was just starting EdSurge.
I'm glad she did.
Yeah, I know, and that was a while ago. And then later on, I had a former student named Henry Harbo who had a startup that they were thinking about joining your incubator for that. And they did not, and we were trying to persuade him to do so. And unfortunately, I don't know what's happened to Henry. He started working for Renaissance Learning, and I don't think his startup went anywhere. But it was, I don't know if you remember this, Bobby, but it was a he, along with some friends from Oberlin who maybe were from Bangladesh, they had started or India, they had started a video conferencing platform so that students could connect.
Yes, I do remember. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's lots of, as you just did, no, not you, as you just did, everybody can pivot and still create a great product the next time around.
And and Henry was awfully young. So yeah. I'm sure he's off doing something very exciting, and I will hear from him down the road. But anyway, I've been a long admirer of your work, Bobbi, and we're so glad to have you here. And thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to.
Let me go through and tell you a little bit about what we're up to. Actionable Innovations is an inclusive professional learning community. We want people from all aspects of education and innovation to be part of this. We merged with my former Global Education Conference community, and we will be back in November doing a conference. Our goals are to inspire education leaders. We want to host conversations and connect people because we think it's really important to build your network continually. And we also write about global education innovations in Medium. And our I'll put our links in the web, in the chat in a little bit. If you'd like to get involved with us and join our actual community, which is located at actionableinnovations.global, you're more than welcome to. If you'd like to be a speaker for this one time and share your book or your knowledge or project or whatever you're doing, we'd love to have you. You're more than welcome to contact me and we can make those arrangements. You can follow us through the following links. If you have a phone, you can just scan it. I also will put the links in the chat as well. This recording will be in YouTube probably within the next couple of hours. And if you happen to miss it, and you can, I also, by the way, going over the recordings is really, really helpful to me a second time. And if you haven't done this yet, if you've been a regular attendee of these things and not listened to the recordings, pick one or two to go back and listen to, because you always pick up more than maybe what you caught the first time. And I found it really valuable to kind of go back and do show notes for these sessions that are a little bit more detailed and have some of the takeaways in it. And I highly recommend, maybe turning up the YouTube speed to double the speed and re-listening to these, because you might find that second listening to be particularly useful. So today I want everyone to introduce themselves in the chat if they feel comfortable doing so. Tell us who you are, where you are, what your role is, so that we all can get to know each other. If you want to add your Twitter handle or your LinkedIn profile, if you're looking to grow your network, feel free to do that as well. If you want to tweet out anything pithy, you can use the hashtag GlobalEd22, and then just try to keep your mic muted if there's background noise as we're going through and that sort of thing. And so our next thing is, Bobbi, I've already introduced you a little bit, but here are your important key points. And these are the websites and Twitter handle of Bobbi. that you can follow. Let me make sure I put that in the chat as well. I'll do that in a second. And then the next thing I wanted to do too, let me find the link here. We normally do this Proust questionnaire, Bobbi. I don't know if I think I sent this to you in a link, but I want to make sure that that we do this with you as well. Don, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's great to know. We
Okay.
also have an Innovate, I'll put it in the chat, but we also have a Twitter handle for InnovateHERs also.
Okay.
And we also have a LinkedIn site too. So.
Oh, awesome. Oh, that's right. You have a LinkedIn group. Okay. So those are the links that I had ready to share with everybody. And then I need to find the Proust questionnaires because I thought Don was going to be here and I don't see him. So what the Proust questionnaire is about is it's taken from Vanity Fair. The back of Vanity Fair has a list of questions that they ask celebrities every week. And what Don did was he took them and adapted them for education to kind of serve as a warm-up for these conversations. And some people like them, some people don't. It throws people, gives people a little, it throws people for a loop. The link to his post about this is right here. And so I'm going to start out with one question, Bobbi, to get us warmed up, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
My idea of perfect happiness, or what I think it's
your idea.
My idea of perfect happiness is, well, if I had my druthers, when my next life, I'm going to be a movie reviewer and I'm going to be able to watch movies all day. My escape is to watch movies on Netflix, and I used to order them all from when you used to order them on CD-ROMs, and I'd spend Saturday and Sunday with 3 movies each day.
Okay, watching movies, I like that. I think my idea of perfect happiness is I'm partial to the Teton Valley in Jackson Hole. I love being able to sit there and look at the mountains. I went to camp there as a kid and spent a lot of time there with my family in general. And if I could do anything, I'd be sitting. My idea of perfect happiness is like sitting and watching the Tetons and having a huckleberry milkshake. Yeah. So that would be mine. If anybody else has an idea of perfect happiness, you're more than welcome to
last week, I spent the week visiting the 5 mighty parks in Utah. So I did hiking. So that was quite lovely and was very happy setting. It was one of those once in a lifetime trips. I said, not coming back. So one day when it was very, very hot, I said, no, we're going into the park today, no matter what.
I thought it was amazing. I have not done that route yet, but that's on my bucket list. If you have not gone into Glacier National Park, that's another just unbelievable national park. I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing. Wow. All right. If anybody else, feel free to chime in the chat. Okay. The next one is which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Some of them they're not rated to being put on.
Yeah, same with me. For John, the word that he overuses all the time is amplify.
Yeah, I probably, one of my colleagues at Penn uses, I'm going to lift up this idea. Mine is probably that is amazing. I'm always amazed at what young and old and all kinds of entrepreneurs do. I'm always shocked because I think of myself as being creative, and I find myself being a cheerleader for more and more people because their creativity is just amazing.
I use awesome all the time too, which is annoying, frankly. Okay, what is your most treasured possession?
Well, my grandchildren, clearly, and my children. But if you ask me in terms of something I hold or own, that's a good question. I've always loved collecting art. And I do have, when I was very, very young, I went to the south of France on $5 a day, when you could travel on $5 a day. And I didn't eat for several days, so I could go to the Picasso pottery factory and buy Picasso plates. And so that's probably right now one of my most treasured possessions.
We are kindred spirits because my grandmother in the late 60s went there to, is it Valois or the Madeira Powder Factory?
Madeira Powder Factory,
Yeah,
yes.
and so I have 3 pieces from her.
Well, they're very valuable if you haven't had them assessed recently.
I haven't, and I've looked at them online, and the ones that we have are probably ones that were mass produced, a lot. They're not necessarily the really elaborate ones. But like I just had they were in a box in my closet. I just had a fire in my office where this closet is, and thank God they were not affected. But that is so funny. I can't believe that, because what are the chances? So for people who don't know the story, Picasso, I think he stumbled upon this pottery factory and asked the owner to teach him how to do pottery. And so for several summers, right, Bobbi? It wasn't. He mass produced pottery in this area, and if you look it up, some of it's really, really cool stuff. And pottery tends to not have the same value as a painting would because it's mass produced, but it's still pretty significant. And I just feel like, I don't know, it's kind of being attached to history. I'm afraid to put this pottery out in my house because I'm afraid somebody will break it.
Well, that's the problem. I had it, I keep taking it off my shelves and putting it on. And I also own a series of Miro lithographs, and my children have argued over who gets what. So anyway, the plate was going to go to my son, and he lived in San Francisco, and I said, I'm not sending it there so there can be an earthquake and drop off the shelf.
I know. I feel like this is the most precious thing I have other than my children too. So
exactly.
That's so funny. I love it. So, and then I'm going to pick a question that he has never asked anybody. And actually it's 2 more questions. Sure. What is the quality that you most like in a woman? I think it's appropriate for today.
Oh, the quality I have is, and this goes right to the book clearly, but I think the quality that I most like is their passion. The passion that they have, whether it's as an entrepreneur, as a mother. I mean, mothers can do unbelievable things if something was happening to their children, or, you hear stories of them lifting up cars, but the passion is just amazing. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on. But the other thing I have is women's ability to be able to, their self-confidence. Those women that say they don't have self-confidence or have confidence that they just need to bring to the top.
I agree. Now, do you have the same characteristics in men? Do you value that? Is that the quality you most like in a man too? Is confidence and passion?
Well, it's a good question, because I think when I think of the man that I would go out with or date, or I think I have great respect for women and men that are obviously intelligent. But I think the one that I respect most in men, because they generally don't have it, is those that are empathetic.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Integrity and curiosity, I would add to the list too, for all humans. Those are 2 things I really value. Okay, so we're done with our Proust questionnaire. And I just want to let you know that a few more people have come into the audience, including one of our previous guests who knows you, and that's Nicole Tucker-Smith. Right. So I'm so happy to see you here, Nicole. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everyone for coming. I'm going to turn this over to Bobbi, and I'm going to switch devices. And so if you're wondering what I'm doing, but if you want to give a short presentation, and then we'll do Q&A and ask you more about your book and how.
Great. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So. All right. Did we lose anybody?
We're here. I think one person had issues with with audio.
You're fading into your world globe. Now I can't hear you.
I'm here, and the reason I'm using two different devices is that one device is not working terribly well, and my good laptop was destroyed in the fire that I had. So I'm waiting for insurance to come through, and I'm on the iPad right now. So anyway, do you want to share slides or anything, or are you ready?
There's no reason to share slides at this point. We can bring them up if there's anything you want. I think one of the things we probably should do is start with a sort of a summary of how we wrote the book and why.
Yeah, so I as I mentioned, I bought the book and started reading it, and it sounds to me that you rounded up some of the most fascinating and entrepreneurial women that you knew in your circles from a wide variety of places and documented their stories. But and one of those stories is yours and your background. So why don't we start there with you telling us about where you've done so many different things in your career. Tell us about your story first to kind of set the tone, I guess.
Well, Kathy and I both wanted to put our stories in the book, and mine's the sort of front end and hers is the back end of the book because it concludes with mentorship, and Kathy is the premier networker, mentor in this field right now, I think. And my story starts with being a teacher. Actually, my first job was in working for a power company as a computer programmer. And at the time, that was sort of very unusual. They didn't have, first of all, there were very few women programmers, or none. And there were also very few engineers at that time didn't program. They were scientists or designers, and they actually gave you their work to program for them because they didn't know how to program. So I worked for the Commonwealth Edison in Chicago. I realized I hated that job. The last thing I wanted to do was be a programmer. And I decided that I needed to go back to college and get a master's degree in the computer science and education. You have to understand, this was in 1971. And so I convinced Virginia Tech that they should let me do my master's work in how computers were used in education. And it was going along very well until I had to defend my thesis. And the graduate school said, well, you can't defend it in education. They're never going to use computers in education. And so therefore, they weren't going to give me my degree. I was going to have to go back and take courses in artificial intelligence, not retake, but take them. I'd taken several because at that time, that was how computer science connected. So I was looking at AI long before it was popular as it is today. Finally, they did, and I went on to stay at Virginia Tech and get my doctorate in instructional design, at the time called curriculum and instruction, but basically it was what we call instructional design today. And so I went on and stayed at the university for 11 years and ran academic computing. And when it was time for me to kind of think about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, the president of the college said to me, you know, Bobbi, you're much too entrepreneurial to be in academics. And so I left and basically began building educational technology products. And I built some of the very early products for Microsoft, for Apple, for McGraw-Hill, CD-ROM products at the time. And for those of you that can remember that, Anne, and some of us that were part of that growth, I can remember what caused Apple to change their computers from being not having floppy disks or disks involved to adding them to every machine was when the interactive books came out. You can remember those stories, and that literally Apple overnight changed their production from 20% with disks to 80% with disks. And that changed the whole industry. And I really enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time building products for a long time. And then oddly, when this was becoming popular, I invested in some of the very early ed tech companies that in the early 90s and mid 90s, I invested in Mama Media. I invested in a LMS product out of California, out of Canada, out of Vancouver. And so I found that I was looking more and more at how I could make a difference, and looked at the ecosystem of education and where it was. And I found that it needed 4 legs. It needed the entrepreneurs, it needed the researchers, it needed the educators, and it needed the investors. And most of the time, investors never talked to educators. They just kind of went away investing the way they were traditionally used to investing. And they never looked whether the product could make a difference or not. And when I got hired to run a fund called Core Learning to invest, I said, we have to have both educators and investors. So it was very exciting. And I did that. We invested in a very big company called Big Chalk. Some of you may remember it. It was one of the early .com companies, and I went to be part of the management team there. And clearly, when the .com bust came, all of us sort of figured out what we were going to do next. And I was approached to run Curriki. So I went from running a .com for-profit to running a nonprofit to look at open source curriculum. And that was very exciting and very impactful. And working with Scott McNeely was an interesting experience as part of my career, who had started Sun Microsystems. And so then when I left that, and this is where I sort of ended up where I am, is when I left, I kind of began investing in technology companies. And the dean at the University of Pennsylvania called me and said, Bobbi, if we don't shake up graduate education, there will not be education schools, because they're failing. They're not, education, they're not making a difference in education, and we need to do something different. And I said, well, I'll come for a couple of years, but I'll only come on 3 conditions. 1, you can't afford me, so you have to pay more than the traditional professor makes. 2, I said, I want to start a fund and an incubator and a master's program. And unless I can do those 3, I'm not coming to teach one-off courses at Penn. And he agreed to all 3 of those things. And we did. We raised $2.2 million to do very early stage seed money through the incubator. And we put 30 companies through, and we ran the business plan competition, of which we gave away millions of dollars over the time I was there. And we also started the first master's degree in education technology. And so when I came to Penn, I kept thinking about how, and this is how the book came to be. I kept thinking about can you teach entrepreneurship? And I don't believe you can, but I can teach you entrepreneurial skills. And so we started to do research around entrepreneurial mindset. And we looked at all of our students and members of our incubator and ran the profile, or an entrepreneurial mindset profile, out of Eckerd College. And as I looked at that data and wrote traditional academic articles, I began to see some trends that fascinated me. And one of those trends, 2 things fascinated me. One was that women entrepreneurs, while risk takers, had a lower risk profile than men. So I thought, well, there's got to be something there. We've got lots of successful women entrepreneurs, but you need a high risk profile to be a success. At least that's what the traditional literature tells us. And the second thing I learned was that women had a much higher interpersonal sensitivity trait than men's. Again, not anything you would not expect, but when I saw this trend and I looked at what success meant and what was causing that and what impact it had, that's when I decided that we should look at an interview and get stories of women entrepreneurs to find out how those traits they applied them. And that's where the book came to be. And the book has sort of 4 stages of traditional research, but basically it's a storybook. It's a storybook of the journey of these women we told their stories in the book. And we found out that, yes, they had lower risk profiles, but they were more calculated risk and more thoughtful. They were very, very careful. They looked at data. They weren't deciding, something just because it sounded good to them and they were going to do it anyway, which tends to be what high risk takers are more likely to do. Not that it's always bad, but for women, they were more thoughtful. But the more fascinating data was around empathy. Women clearly had high empathy scales, but when you asked how that translated into why they were successful, 3 things came up. 1, they were able to build better teams because they were very empathetic towards their team. 2, their teams stayed with them longer. They had lower turnover. One of the women we interviewed in the book had 98% of her founding teams, 40 people, are still with her company many, many years later. So, and the third thing was sort of something that you didn't expect, but they were able to fire and build teams better. They were more empathetic about letting a person go, and that didn't destroy the team. Nobody was angry. That they always positioned it at what was right for the person and not what was right, not just right for the company. So we learned a lot of things. And then the other thing we learned from the data was, as we said, women have very high self-confidence that are entrepreneurs, the women we interviewed. However, almost all of women, and you can probably raise your hand or agree or not agree, they always had an imposter syndrome. Every woman we spoke to can tell you a story of where they walked into a meeting or a room, and while they knew they were the most qualified there or they had the best idea there, they always felt that they shouldn't be at the table. And we hear this story over and over again about 2 people walking into the room for an interview, and you're a highly qualified woman, you have more skills than the other person, and you are and you still feel that you're the least qualified in the room. A man, doesn't matter how qualified he is, if he's sitting there, he says, I can do the job. And women have to learn to kind of do that. So those are my story, and I've got all sorts of incidents, but the more interesting stories are the stories in the book.
So so you said something that intrigued me. You can teach entrepreneurial skills, but you can't create an entrepreneur, or you can't. So expound on that a little bit. Like, what are those skills? What are the necessary skills to be an entrepreneur? And what part of it is inherent that you can't teach, out of curiosity?
Great. Well, I don't think you can teach someone to be an entrepreneur. We asked every single one of the people we interviewed whether they were born or taught to be an entrepreneur. And there is some combination of that. But most of them said that you can't go and sit in a class, even in our master's program, and I can't make you an entrepreneur. I can give you the skills that will make you a better entrepreneur. But it's like a lot of fields. I don't think you can make somebody a mathematician. I can make them a better mathematician, and I can teach you arithmetic, but I can't make you a mathematician. The reason I bring that up is my first career was as a math teacher, and I was a math major undergraduate. And I know that I'll never be a mathematician because I don't think in that, I can't visualize the abstract the way a mathematician can, but I can use mathematics and practical applications very well. That's what I was able to learn from studying the skills I did. And I can teach people math, but I'm not making them mathematicians. And I feel the same way about entrepreneurs. I can make you a better entrepreneur by giving you the skills you need. And those skills, some are skills and some are traits. Some you're born with, the traits, and the skills I can teach you. So I can teach you to be better organized, and I can teach you the financial models, and I can teach you to look at, understand what valuation and investment and all of those things are, which makes you a better decision maker as an entrepreneur. But that doesn't necessarily make you an entrepreneur. What is an entrepreneur is a good question.
So yeah, what is entrepreneurial talent? How do you know when you've seen somebody that has that innate ability to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I look at entrepreneurs all the time, and I look at lots and lots of companies, and I get at least 5 people emailing me a week with a new business plan. And I think there are 3 things that I identify. One is they need to give me a problem that they're solving, not a solution. I see so many people that send me a great idea, and particularly in this AI and virtual reality area, I see lots of really cool solutions. But when I ask them what problem that's going to solve, they can't tell me. So they have to start with the problem. And so when I talk to them, the second thing is, I think what makes a great entrepreneur is clearly passion. I always am shocked at how people get to me and how, I call it stalking sometimes, but I think if you're not a good stalker, you're not going to be a good entrepreneur. Because as I said, if you want to have the right network of people and the right mentors, they're not going to come out of the woodwork. Most of the people you do want to talk to are pretty busy people. And so you have to come forward and be pretty assertive. I wouldn't say aggressive, because that I don't like it, but assertive and pretty creative about how you get to the people that you want to talk to and what you present to them. I remember, and you probably were there, Nona, when one of the professors at Wharton has an exercise where he teaches about making pitches, and he gets in the elevator, and the building at Wharton is 8 or 10 stories, I can't remember, and you have to pitch to them your idea before the elevator stops at the 8th floor. And you get graded on that. I mean, it's a great fun exercise. He arranges with the building so the elevator won't stop anywhere else. And you get whatever it takes to get up to the top floor. But so you have to be pretty aggressive and pretty clear what your idea is. And then the third thing is you have to understand the research behind your product. If one more person comes to me and says, I have the best idea to teach reading, that nobody's ever done it, I look at them and say, no, that's not true. Somebody's done this. Your idea has to tell me how you're going to do it better, or how you've discovered a new pedagogy that will do it better. And you better understand the research to do that to me. Don't come in just because one school used it or one person used it and it looked great to them. So most entrepreneurs do not have an research mindset. And research is not just research about the product, but research about the market and research about the lean in kind of research. How have you tested it? How have you found out what the market will use? And what's the problem that you're solving? And what will the market react to? So that's what I look for, those 3 things.
Yeah, and that reminds me, Audrey Waters had a post a long time ago. I think it was a 2-parter of what entrepreneurs needed to know, or business people needed to know about education, and had a laundry list of things. And I went to look for it recently. I couldn't find it, so I don't know if she took it down or not. But it was brilliant. And I think understanding the history of education and how policies have impacted the industry too is really, really important. And I don't think there are that many. I don't know. I don't see a lot of things, particularly in the market these days, that get me really excited. And I feel like they're solving problems for some people, but they're not. I guess I like to see technology that enables something to happen that's different, whether it is enabling kids to do something in a creative way and show what they know. For instance, I love Book Creator because it is an open-ended tool that allows teachers and kids to do really creative things. Right. Whereas a lot of the market now seems to be driven by, this is not really related to your book, but seems to be driven to finding those solutions to assessment naughty problems or learning management systems and that sort of thing. That doesn't particularly excite me, but that's just me. what kinds of trends do you see in ed tech, just off the top of your head, in terms of what kinds of products are coming out and that sort of thing?
Well, it's interesting because I look at, I do some angel investing now, personally, and I only invest in a small number of companies each year, and I only invest in companies that can, I think that I can make a difference in helping them grow and succeed. And I have 3 areas that I look at, and they have to be solved because there are big problems around them, and that's why I looked at them. My first one that I really, really like is in the area of assessment, but not assessment in the sense of whether another test or not. I want to look at assessment to help teachers, parents, corporations understand the data. We do a lot of assessments and nobody understands the data. So I look at companies that have better ways of showing the data and sharing the data with the users of the information. And the other thing I'm particularly interested in, have invested in, actually worked with and invested in a couple of companies that are in this space. I'm very much interested in and learning science and how people learn and how we can translate that to the technology online. And I look at companies that provide what I'm calling the Fitbit for learning. I want to know if I'm learning, not through assessment, but I want to know, how do I learn and what things do I look at, and what, how do I use the internet, and how do I use my contacts and my networks and my communities and things like that. So I'm particularly interested in that area. And the third area, and by the way, they're all interconnected. So when I find the utopia, it'll probably do all 3 of these things. But the third area I'm interested in, and Nona mentioned, is I'm very interested in how we personalize learning and what are the ways to do that. And what is personalized learning? And again, how does AI or virtual reality fit? How does the data get used to personalize learning? And how do we engage people in learning? So one of the companies I'm very interested in is created this Fitbit for learning. So it looks at your learning style. It allows you to bring in all different types of content to share and learn with, comment on, translates it from text to speech. So it brings together all the learning tools, and then it assesses how you're using the learning tools. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's beginning to get at what I'm interested in.
That sounds interesting. Hey, Nicole, did you have a question for Bobbi or a comment? It's good to see you.
Hi,
Nice to see you, Nicole. Yeah.
Good to see you, Bobbi. Yes, I had a question. Let me move this over. So
I see your question in the chat.
Yeah.
So, is that
yes.
the one you want to talk about?
Well, I did. I plan to read the book, and I was reading about the book, and I saw that it mentioned it was a diverse group of women. And I'll just say, because I met you, I can't remember if I met you through Dream It or Penn State. I can't remember.
I think we get to Dream It. I think so.
Yeah, maybe Dream It. And I remember at that time doing the whole tour of getting investors and all that other kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We finally did get investment, not necessarily at maybe a little bit later than that. But I was ready to wring my hands of it, because the amount of racism and sexism was so infuriating. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Mm-hmm. And so we actually got funding from a Black bank, because just it was the amount of micro and macro aggressions was like, I'm not putting myself through this anymore. Right. And so I was wondering, given that it was a diverse group and different ethnicities are going to experience that the path of an entrepreneur differently, right? Obviously there's no monolith race, right? Everyone's going to experience differently, but there are some areas in where intersectionality comes at play. And I just wondered if you saw any of that in the stories in the book.
Well, it is diverse, both from around the country, age and ethnicities. Interestingly, we found more in common than we expected. We expected to find a lot of diversities. We noticed that all of the women, one, because they were women, experienced some prejudice, microaggression, or by men, if they were women, whether they're white women, black women, Indian. We also noticed that all of the, but there were some differences. The women, one of the women we interviewed, and her story is just one of those, it's fascinating, but one of the women we interviewed was the head of the Calvert Fund, a Black woman, graduated from Wharton and graduated from Harvard. And she talks about some of the how she wanted to make an impact and how she and choosing what field she went into. And at first it was difficult to get in and be accepted that she was. And now she runs the Social Impact Fund for Apollo Management, one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. And she still deals with it. And when they were having the management there got taken down because of some scandals, she said, I can't go out and raise impact funding when you're doing these kind of things and telling people that you truly believe in this. And, you know, they kind of looked at her like, what are you saying? But she stuck to her guns, and they, you know, they made changes to fit what she wanted to do. Woman in India talks about what she's doing and how she was trying to go into communities and help women from families that wouldn't normally go to school or be educated, and how she had to deal with families there because those were the children that were going out and, you know, begging on the street, and that even if they sent them to school, they were going to lose whatever money, not realizing that they could do better if they did go to school. And it took a flood in this particular community to, and that part of it's not in the book, but it took a flood in that community to show that the people that they helped and what happened when that flood occurred. And there was this school, and the fathers who normally never showed up at the school showed up, and they saw what they were doing for their women, the girls, and changed their attitudes about it. So yeah, there were a lot of barriers, but interestingly, there were not as many. The barriers were very similar across all the women that we interviewed. So when you read the story, you'll see the book, you'll see some of the themes that ride through it. And as I said, the theme of self-confidence was there. The theme of calculated risk-taking was across all of that. And the empathy issue. The fourth thing that we did find, which was kind of interesting, probably the biggest surprise of the book, was that all of the women filled out a self-assessment for us. And that's in the back of the book. You can take it yourself, of what you think your strongest entrepreneurial mindset skills are and traits, and what you think your weakest are. All of the women put need to achieve. All of the women in our test found need to achieve important. However, when we asked them if that was their strength, none of them picked need to achieve as a strength. Which was kind of interesting because these were all very successful women. They all said that they, you know, were the leaders. They grew up taking on responsibility and thinking out of the box. But when you asked them if that was a strength, they didn't see it as a strength. And we asked them why, and their answer was that they saw it more as negative. They didn't want people to think that they were overachieving and that they were bossy or that they were aggressive versus assertive. And so they didn't want it to show up as a high skill, although they realized it was the skill that helped make them successful and rise to the top.
Well, I mean, I can understand that. I remember after Dreaming of It pitching and one investor coming up to me and saying, well, you seem like you know what you're talking about, but if I invest in you, you seem like you have the need to control everything. You seem really bossy. And I'm the CEO.
Yeah.
And then in the same, in another time around that same time, and another, you know, white male investor said to me, oh, you're so poised and well-spoken. Did you learn that in the military? I mean, that's like stuff like that. I was like, I'm done with this.
Yeah. Now, where is your company today? Tell us.
Oh my gosh. We're doing awesome. Lessoncast is doing awesome. So I was in the video last week, so I don't want to like take up too much time in talking about it. But honestly, just a lot of things happened and stars aligned, and we're leveraging technology to improve teacher learning, because how do you improve schools and make big changes in schools without recognizing the workforce that teachers are, and the need to improve professional development. And a lot of things happened, including I had breast cancer and everything, and because of the pandemic I was still able to work, and because I had already been thinking about using technology differently, we were really poised. So now we're kind of exploding, and it's good. Life is good.
Right. The company, somebody just asked me that what the company was that was doing the Fitbit. It's called Mindstone. It's out of the UK. But there are a couple other companies looking at that same space. One is Yellow Dig, and there are a lot of people kind of thinking about how we learn, how we get engaged in discussions, and how you learn from discussions. So we're learning so many different ways, as you just pointed out, Nicole, about being online now. We can learn, and I always have this running commentary or argument at Penn that when we went to online, everybody thought it was not great and it wasn't going to work, and what they did was they never saw the new normal of the good things that have come out of this. They only saw that we were going to go back to the old normal, whatever that was. But anyway, even at Penn, they insisted that everybody come back to campus this fall. It was past fall, that they didn't want to learn online. And a lot of the faculty had to fight for it to continue to use it. And I'm not suggesting one is better than the other, but I am suggesting that they're not the same. And there's some things that came out on both sides that we need to continue. So how do we figure out how to merge those ways of learning and looking at things, and how we learn? And some kids learned great on Zoom, some didn't. And Zoom is not very engaging. So what are the new programs and the new platforms that are looking at using a Zoom-based idea, but are more engaging? So one of the companies that has created a new platform called SoWork, and they basically have a platform that looks just like your physical office virtually. And so some people could be sitting in their office, and some people can actually be an avatar on the SoWork and work together. And there's a place to get coffee in the virtual reality, and there's a place to have small meetings, and it's really a very clever platform. It's not perfect because the technology isn't perfect yet, it'd never be, but it is interesting.
I think Zoom as a platform is interesting, and I think there are more apps that are being developed to make it more interesting. There's one, we're supposed to be looking at something, I've never heard of this LMS before, but John Edelson is going to introduce us to someone that's building this platform into Zoom or through an app, I believe. And so it's more connected in general. But I think to me, the problem with remote learning for me personally, I have a kid who's in college right now who was remote this year for the most part. It didn't work for him because I think that part of it that's missing is the pedagogy. Like, what are the practices that make it engaging for students? And how can we make it interactive and interesting for them, as opposed to just plopping the content online? That's the piece that's missing.
So that's missing because we're not training faculty or teachers to use it. We just, we just happened overnight. So here it is. You just get on and be a talking head and everything will be fine. But we didn't give any professional development at the higher ed level or the elementary or the high school. So, or even in corporations. So it's not that the platform's bad. It's that the platform, people haven't shown how to use it, and it is relatively primitive, although it's improving. So how do we help teachers that are generally in the classroom? They know how to engage students. They don't know how to do it online because we've never modeled it for them. We don't have a lot of models. You did ask an interesting question, or do I see any change going on in being more culturally responsible and incubators and funders and changing practices? I see ed tech companies being very conscious of what that looks like in their product. I met, and she advises our master's program, the head of product diversity at Google, and her whole job is to look at products and see if they are having microaggressions or if they're not diverse enough, or so her job is to do that. And I'm sure it's not an easy job. And again, it's probably always still missing things she should be looking at, but she's doing a very good job at it. And many big companies that build products are doing that. I think incubators are, luckily, we've seen lots of incubators come up for diverse groups and diverse sectors of the education space. And they're great, they're very good ones. And I think when I was running Etsy, our incubator, we had about a 30% of every one of our classes was diverse. So we were pretty diverse between women, ethnicities, and ages and where they were located in the 10 or 12 people we took every time. And we did 5 groups of those. So we had a lot of companies go through. We also, I think that we are all looking to being more culturally responsive and trying to understand what that means. Because does it mean, yes, I now have 4, members that are women, or 4 that are Black or Latino, whatever the group is that enough to be culturally responsible? It's not. You need to think about what you're teaching, what you're looking at, who you bring in as experts, who the modeling is done by. What examples do you give of companies that are when you're telling other journey stories to our students, what kind of companies are they running? And the other thing I think investors need to be aware of is finding more innovative ways to invest in companies that don't fit their traditional financial models.
So I was just thinking about a couple of things that come to mind, and this is not because somebody that works for Apple is in the audience, but Apple seems to have been growing some programs that are associated with their Apple stores. And so, for instance, that there's a program that's grassroots with youth that works with the brand new, if you haven't been to the new LA Apple stores in downtown LA, it's amazing. And there's like a program that works specifically with that one. And I think they also have something similar to the Chicago Apple store. So there's these kind of youth-oriented arts programs that are working with that. So that's one way of outreach. But then I want to say that there is an entrepreneurial program for app development too, as well, that's specifically geared towards diverse populations. So that's what, I'm wondering, but it's also what you said about it, representation matters. But I would think, and maybe Nicole can speak to this, it's more about like, how do they address the stuff that you faced, Nicole, the comments that were insensitive?
Yeah, like I see all these programs about how to, here are things that, and I don't like the term minority, but here are things that people of color can do to have better access to this and better access to that. And I'm like, stop trying to fix me. Look at the system.
Yeah.
Look at the system, because I've seen investors say, well, we're looking for this and we're looking for that. And then I'll present and they're looking for reasons to say no, but they see a young white kid who's usually male and presenting something and it reminds them of him. And they'll literally say, oh, I invested in him because he reminded me of me.
Yeah.
And we don't ever address that fact. And so I had to find people who were cheering for me. I had to find people who were specifically looking for, because I can't get investment from somebody who's not looking to invest in Black people, particularly Black women.
So are there investment groups, Bobbi, that you know of that are looking to be this way, or are people of color generated? Is there anything that's out there? Is there a professional learning community for entrepreneurs that's addressing equity? Anything like that?
Yes, they're more starting. They're not enough, and they don't have enough funding. I think one of the investors that has begun to do it and is looking at it again is Maya Sharpley, who was with Juvo. And I think Matt Greenfield at Rethink has done a very good job of not making his only diverse, but bringing in people that do look like the people they want to invest in. He's just brought in 3 really top-notch people at the partner level, not just bringing them in as tokens. So Rethink is doing a good job. I think the group that graduated from my master's program a couple of years ago now invest very early seed money called the Bricolage Fund. You have to, but it's only right now through the to the Black students in our that come through our master's program. So more and more people are starting separate funds and being more conscious in what Nicole just said of hiring people that do look like her and can say, I want to invest in you because that's what I did. And and Maya Sharpley is one of the people we covered in our book. We also covered Lisa Hall, who was an investor, is a Black investor, and we covered a woman investor out of the UAE. So, and she's done some very interesting thing, created a group called Womena that helps, and it came from a very interesting side of the industry. She didn't start as a traditional investor. She started to help startups in the Arab world where women are not particularly funded or considered entrepreneurs. She helped them look at their PR and their branding because she came from a marketing side. And then she went out and raised a fund to invest in these. But she basically helped them learn the skills to market themselves and to brand themselves. And then she did it. And then we have another woman from the UAE, from Dubai, and she, in the book, Monica, she had started in a family that was, traditional Indian family that had moved to Dubai, and she went out and started daycare centers, and women were not traditionally, they didn't need daycare centers. That's not what you had. It was and she kind of overcame that, and from a family that didn't think she should work, kind of thing. They could afford that she didn't work. They didn't think she should. She wanted to, and now she's grown this to 4 big centers, and not just families that middle class families, but the upper class families in Dubai, wealthy families are bringing their children to her daycare center because it's such a creative learning experience.
Nona, do you want to, any questions that you want to ask or before we wrap up?
I love that quote that Nicole put down. I do think these are issues, and I think you're doing exactly the right things to, to get funded. Lucy, you had mentioned earlier, and Bobbi too, about student engagement. And I don't know if you would it's because you're familiar with what we're doing. It was uncanny, if not, because we have this new measure of student engagement that's based on research of learning theory. And that's how we drive professional learning. Because the goal was, how do you know what professional learning educators need unless there's some data to support it? And there was no data or measurement on pedagogy and the extent to which instruction was relevant and interesting and asking students to think. And the research shows that student engagement is also a leading indicator of academic outcomes, and that students in highly engaging classrooms learn an average of 4.5 more months of math instruction than those in less engaging classrooms. So our thought was, we have to measure and drive professional learning and prioritize it based on the student experience of the class lesson. And right now there's no data on that. So it was so exciting to hear you guys say that. And we feel like we're a little bit ahead of the curve here, and we've been working on it for a couple of years now, and we're really piloting it and getting a lot of great feedback that we're onto something that no one else has done yet in the way that we're doing it. So it's just like super exciting. And Nicole, I'd love to talk to you about Lesson Cast. I was on your website, and it looks like you have really great content of professional learning. We're happy to partner with people that do this and just give you data that starts the conversation from how students are experiencing a class lesson versus just an observation.
I'm so excited to meet you here, and I'm going to message you on LinkedIn. I'm going to look you up. Because I can already see synergies. We have a series that we're doing right now on diversifying curriculum. It's called Curriculum Representation, workshop series that we're doing across the country, and it's having like a really transformational impact. And part of it is gathering the data to show, no, this is increasing engagement. They're like, this is not about making children feel bad in classes. This is about being able to understand diverse perspectives. This is actually going to make us stronger. And so I would love to connect with you.
Yeah, you all are both timely. You should also connect with Ed Connective, as I said, if you don't know Will, in Richmond. And you're in DC, right? You're in Towson, or you're in Baltimore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
Bobbi, it would be really great. I was thinking, looking at your book last night, that professional development for people like us is not really there. Like, where do we go for our professional development? Why don't you and Kathy do like a workshop before ISTE, or have a meetup, or have a mini conference of your own, or something for women who want to go down this path? I think that could be, like, add to the 5 million other things that you're doing already. But seriously, I think there's more of a movement.
Yeah, we're working on that but hopefully we're doing one at ISTE, and we're doing one at Learn Launches meeting in Fenway. Now, where are you located, Nona?
Right outside of New York City. I'm in Chappaqua, New York.
Oh, Chappaqua. Okay. Well, this I'd love to continue, but I know you.
It's time to go. I don't want to keep you. So
No, I'm fine, but I know everybody kind of, an hour's pushing our limits on time for everybody. So
we've been going over every single time, and it's fine.
I didn't want it to
Lucy,
end.
I just wanted
didn't
to
want
say
it to end.
Lucy, I just wanted to say one thing to Bobbi, and so much of it is thank you, because I've been I had the opportunity to evaluate and judge for the PEN competitions, as well as other entrepreneurial things around the country over the years. And because I was never an entrepreneur, I was never 100% sure that my vision of when I was reviewing those things was on point. And hearing that most of the things I look for when I've been a reviewer, you've echoed today, makes me feel much more confident when asked to be a part of things like that.
Well, Anne, you've now echoed what I've heard from several people that have read the book, that the book made them look differently at things that they wouldn't have, that whether they were an entrepreneur or not. And so hopefully other women that read it will find the same thing.
I'm ordering my copy now. I'm going on there. and ordering it.
May I ask, Bobbi, what are you doing at ISTE? I've been looking for a reason to go.
Well, they have a leadership day on Sunday, and we're going to present as part of the leadership session. It's a whole day. And if you register for ISTE, that's free. You don't have to pay extra to do that. And it's on Sunday of the workshop. So
Maybe I'll have to go too.
I think I might go.
Well, it's in New Orleans. Of course, I went to school in New Orleans, and you do not want to be in New Orleans in June. It's like being in a sauna, but it's actually a great city to be at a meeting at.
And the last time I was in New Orleans was either for COSINT or for NEC.
Yeah.
So, which was a long time ago.
A long time ago, if it was still called
I
NEC.
know.
Still called neck.
I know. So yeah, I'm debating it, but I need a reason to go. But I really think that this has legs, Bobbi, and it's a great read, and you can take a chapter at a time and dive into it. It doesn't, you don't have to read it all at once. I think there are little case studies in there,
Right.
and the research that you have in there to back things up too, I think is very helpful from what I can tell.
Well,
So,
when I'm a famous author, and I had always written academic books and not sort of trade books, and I was writing this book, I thought that I would like to be the next Malcolm Gladwell, because the reason I like Malcolm's books is because he always tells stories, but he interleaves it with the data. And so that was sort of the model as we built this book. I didn't want it to be academic, but I knew I had a lot of data, and I didn't just want to write another academic article saying this percentage and that percentage. And we do present the data on our website. There's a whole, document you can download on the research behind the book in more detail. And also at the back of the book, we present the demographics and the research, but we really wanted the research to support the stories and not the stories support the research.
and can you put the link in, put any links into the chat one more time for anybody who didn't get them, and the link to your LinkedIn group too?
Yeah.
That would be really helpful. I'm just gonna stop recording, and then we can keep chatting if you want. But Bobbi, thank you so much for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad everybody was able to make some connections and have some takeaways from this book. And I'm looking forward to digging into it further. So thank you again for coming.
The name of our group in LinkedIn is the subtitle of the book, Why Purpose-Driven Entrepreneurial Women Rise to the Top.
Okay, great. And let me stop